The night it all fell apart. We were lying in bed, the room bathed in the soft, warm glow of Linda's phone screen. She was scrolling through it as usual when a video popped up. I watched her face shift from relaxed to horrified in an instant. She gasped, audibly, her hand shooting up to cover her mouth. The phone slipped from her fingers, landing between us, still playing. I saw it. I knew exactly what she was looking at. It was me, and Sarah. The angle was clear, the scene unmistakable, and the audio. There was no room for interpretation. What the F asterisk 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 is this? Linda screamed, grabbing the phone, shoving it into my face. I didn't flinch. I didn't blink. I met her frantic eyes with a slow, deliberate gaze and said, "It's exactly what it looks like." Her body jerked back as if I'd struck her. The scream that followed was a mix of rage, disbelief, and heartbreak. You cheated on me with Sarah? Are you insane?" I stood up calmly, adjusting my shirt like I was stepping out of a normal day. "You're upset. I get it," I said, my tone measured, almost soothing. But screaming won't change anything. Her fury exploded. She grabbed the nearest object, a lamp, and hurled it at me. It shattered against the wall, missing me by mere inches. "You bastard! How could you?" I didn't react, just watched her pace the room, her face a twisted blend of fury and disbelief. She was frantic, tears streaking down her face, her fists clenched so tightly I thought they might break. "Do you even care? Do you even realize what you've done?" I tilted my head, my expression unfazed. "Of course I care," I said slowly. "But maybe you should think about why this happened." Her eyes narrowed, her lips trembling, and for a brief moment, confusion replaced some of the rage. "What the hell are you talking about?" I leaned back, my gaze steady, unwavering. "Figure it out." The room was thick with silence, broken only by the sharpness of her shallow breath. She stared at me, but the words she had prepared seemed to wither away. Then, with a frustrated scream, she turned and stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind her. But she didn't stay gone for long. Minutes later, she stormed back in, her face still flushed with rage. "You're going to sit there and act like you're justified?" she spat, her voice rising again. "You're going to act like this is normal?" I remained seated, calm and collected. "You want answers, Linda? Fine. Let's talk about Sarah. Let's talk about everything." She froze mid-step, her face contorting with pain and anger, and I could see it. The moment she realized she was about to hear things she wasn't prepared for. "Go ahead," she said, her voice shaking. "Tell me why you destroyed our marriage. Tell me why you F asterisk 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 Ed, my best friend." I folded my hands, leaning back slightly. "It started a few months ago. She came over one night, said she was feeling lonely, needed someone to talk to while you were out. She needed a friend." Linda's lip curled, her fists clenched tighter at her sides. "And that somehow led to you screwing her." I didn't flinch. "It didn't happen all at once," I said, my voice maddeningly even. "At first, it was innocent, talking, listening, being a shoulder to cry on. But one thing led to another, and before I knew it, we were in the living room on the couch where you and I usually sit." She flinched as if I'd slapped her. I wasn't finished. "It wasn't just once, Linda. It happened again, and again, at her place, at ours, even in your car." I saw her face twist in pain, but I didn't stop. She was enthusiastic, let's put it that way. "Stop!" she screamed, her voice breaking, but I ignored her, leaning in closer. "She told me things about you, Linda. Things you confided in her. How you felt lonely. How you missed the way things used to be between us. She used your own words to justify what we were doing." Her legs wobbled, and she collapsed on the edge of the bed, her face buried in her hands. "You're a monster," she whispered, her voice full of defeat. "Am I?" I shot back, my voice rising. "Or am I just the man you made me? You think I didn't notice, Linda? You think I didn't see the texts? The late night calls. Her eyes widened, her breath catching in her throat. Tommy has nothing to do with this, she stammered. Doesn't he? I said, my voice dripping with venom. You think I didn't notice how you lit up every time his name came up? How you suddenly had so many errands to run. Silence. Deafening silence. Then quietly, almost in a whisper, I added, you had no right. Her head snapped up. No right, she hissed. You have no right to turn this around on me. I barked out a laugh, standing up abruptly. You gave me every right the moment you decided to sneak around with your high school sweetheart. Don't stand there and act like the victim, Linda. You're not innocent. She stared at me, her tears flowing freely now, her mouth opening and closing like she wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. I leaned in, my voice low and cold. Now you know. Now you understand what it feels like. She buried her face in her hands, sobbing uncontrollably. I stood there for a moment, watching her unravel, before turning and walking out. This wasn't over, but I'd said what I needed to say. I didn't leave the house. Instead, I sat downstairs in the living room, the cold glow of the streetlights filtering through the blinds. My mind wasn't racing. It was calm, methodical. Everything had led to this moment. She came down a long time later, her footsteps slow, hesitant. Her face was pale, streaked with tears, but her eyes burned with a fury only betrayal could fuel. You planned this, didn't you? She hissed. I tilted my head slightly, motioning for her to sit. Do you really want to know, Linda? Do you really want to hear how much I know? She didn't sit. She stood there, her fists trembling with anger and pain. Tell me, she demanded, if you've destroyed everything, at least have the decency to explain why. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees, my hands clasped together. All right, let's start with Tommy. Her face twitched, her breath hitching. What about him? I know about the texts, Linda, the late-night phone calls, the secret meetings. Her head shook violently. You're lying. You don't know anything. I let out a cold chuckle. You think so? I followed you, Linda. Every time you said you were running errands. Every time you worked late. I saw the two of you at that little cafe downtown. The one with the corner booth you always liked. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. I didn't stop. I saw you holding his hand, laughing like a couple of teenagers. You even kissed him, right there, in public. Her knees buckled, but she caught herself on the back of a chair. You're insane, she whispered. Am I? I said, my voice cutting like a blade. Or were you just sloppy? She stood there, trembling. I leaned in closer, my voice dripping with disdain. Do you remember the night you came home late, saying there was a big meeting at work? I watched you walk into his apartment, Linda. I stood outside for hours, waiting, my heart pounding with a mix of dread and resolve. When you finally emerged, your hair was a mess, your clothes wrinkled and disheveled. She was trembling now, tears streaming down her face, her voice barely a whisper. Why are you doing this? Why are you telling me this? I stood up, towering over her, my presence heavy and unyielding. Because you deserve to know how it feels, I said, my voice low, but with a sharp edge. You deserve to know that every smile you gave him, every kiss, every touch, it was all being watched by me. Linda crumpled into the chair, sobbing uncontrollably. I leaned down, my face inches from hers, speaking softly, but every word cutting deep. You broke us, Linda. Not me. You. And now you get to live with that. Her sobs filled the room, her shoulders heaving with the weight of the truth. For a moment, I thought she might faint from the force of it all, but instead, she looked up at me. Her eyes were bloodshot, wild with a mix of desperation and fury. You're sick. She spat through her tears, her voice trembling with disgust. You've been watching me like some kind of psycho, following me, taking notes on my every move. I shrugged, unaffected by her accusation. I had to, Linda. You weren't exactly going to tell me the truth, were you? You think I wanted to see this unfold, piece by disgusting piece. She slammed her fist on the armrest of the chair, her rage boiling over. You had no right. You're just as guilty as I am. Am I? I snapped, my voice rising for the first time. Tell me, Linda, did I meet you in secret? Did I betray you first? Or was it you who decided our vows didn't matter anymore? You're the one who turned us into this. She recoiled as though my words had physically struck her, but I wasn't done. I pressed on, refusing to let her regain control. Do you know how many nights I spent sitting outside his apartment, watching you, wondering if maybe I was wrong, praying that it wasn't true? But it was, wasn't it? Her lips quivered. For a moment, I thought she might deny it again, but instead, she whispered, Why? Why didn't you just confront me? Why go through all of this? I laughed bitterly, the sound sharp and cold. Because confrontation wouldn't have been enough, Linda. I needed you to feel what I felt. The humiliation, the betrayal. I wanted you to understand what it's like to watch someone you love give themselves to someone else. She stood abruptly, swaying slightly as if her legs could barely hold her weight. You're a monster, she hissed. A manipulative, heartless monster. I took a step closer, forcing her to meet my gaze. Maybe, but I learned from the best, didn't I? Her face crumpled, and she turned away, stumbling toward the stairs. But before she could leave, I called after her, my voice cutting through the silence like a knife. This isn't over, Linda. Not even close. She froze mid-step, her back to me. I could see her shoulders tense, a quiet shudder running through her. What else could you possibly do to me? She whispered, her voice barely audible. I smirked, though she couldn't see it. You'll find out soon enough. The sound of her footsteps faded upstairs, and I waited. I waited until the quiet of the house became oppressive, heavy, suffocating. Then, with deliberate slowness, I retrieved the envelope I had been keeping for this very moment. Linda came back down, her face pale and drawn. Her eyes flickered to the envelope in my hands as I sat on the couch, tapping it lightly against my palm. What now? She asked, her voice hoarse and filled with dread. I gestured for her to sit. This is the final piece, Linda. The last chapter in this little saga of ours. She hesitated, her hands trembling, but eventually sank into the chair across from me. I handed her the envelope. Go on. Open it. Her fingers fumbled with the seal, tearing it open. The contents spilled into her lap, legal documents. She scanned the words, her eyes darting across them, and then the realization hit. Her mouth fell open. Divorce, she croaked, her voice barely audible. You're divorcing me? That's right, I said, leaning back with a calmness that only seemed to enrage her further. And if you keep reading, you'll notice something else. Her eyes darted back to the papers, flipping through them frantically. Then she froze. No, you can't do this. Oh, but I can, I replied, my tone icy. Everything we own together, every bank account, every asset, it's all mine now. You're left with nothing. She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. We built this life together. You can't just take it all. Actually, I can, I said, my voice cutting through her protest like a knife. While you were busy sneaking around with Tommy, I was busy making sure that every asset, every investment was shifted into my name. You signed the papers yourself, Linda. Do you remember that? Or were you too distracted with your little affair? Her face twisted in horror as the full weight of my words sank in. You set me up, she whispered, her voice hollow with disbelief. I did, I admitted without hesitation. And it wasn't even hard. You were so caught up in your lies, so busy running off to be with him, that you didn't even notice what I was doing. She stood, her body shaking with rage. You're evil, she hissed. You destroyed everything. I rose to my feet, towering over her. No, Linda, you destroyed everything. I just made sure you paid for it. Her sobs broke through the air like shattered glass, but for a brief moment, I almost felt something close to pity, almost. But then I remembered the nights I spent alone, watching her betray me, and that pity vanished. Sign the papers, I said coldly. Make it easy on yourself. Or don't. Either way, it's over. She collapsed into the chair, clutching the papers to her chest as if they were the last remnants of her life, the life she no longer recognized. One last thing, I said, stepping back toward the door. She looked up at me, her face soaked in tears, her body trembling. I continued, my voice steady and final. I sent the photos of you and Tommy to his wife. I thought she deserved to know the truth. You can thank me later for that little surprise. Her mouth opened in shock. Her words caught somewhere between a scream and a sob. You did what? Done. I finished for her, my voice sharp, final. I'm done. And now. So are you? With that, I turned and left, the door closing behind me, leaving the house in ruins, leaving behind what was once our life together. As the cold night air hit my face, I didn't feel regret. I didn't feel sorrow. I felt freedom, true, unshackled freedom.